Let's get it on now. Select and make your first pick. Let's get it on now. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. Get it on now. Choose and pick the best one. Let's get it on now. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's get it on now. Select
Good
and
morning.
make your first pick. Get it on now. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6.
The man you see before you is named Lewis James, who is just your normal, average 23-year-old man, who was born in Denver, Colorado but had to live in Queens, New York, with his foster stepmother who adopted him when he was 13, after his biological parents died from drug overdoses when he lived in Colorado. To make things more difficult, he also has 2 sons living with him and his stepmother, after his ex-girlfriend Emily got a life sentence for murder. Because of this, he had to drop out of high school at age 16 to find a job, which he got working at night as a bouncer at a local bar. But he was getting very little pay, only getting $500 a month. James felt very lost during all this, but was always in search of a much better job to provide a much better situation for his family. However, due to not finishing high school while looking after 2 boys, it was difficult for him to find one. However, that all changed one day. As he was walking home from work, he noticed a boxing gym. As he went inside the old broken gym, he was greeted by an old fellow named Joe Doyle, who asked Lewis if he wanted to learn how to box. With no other option to support his family and stepmother, he said yes to the opportunity, starting his boxing career. Lewis James, a determined, aspiring boxer, found himself 1 year into his intense boxing training, struggling to find fights that offered decent pay due to him not having any amateur experience. However, his luck changed when he stumbled upon a boxing poster announcing an 8-man welterweight tournament hosted by the United States Association of Boxing for unknown or unranked up-and-coming boxers. The winner would not only receive a cash prize of $10,000, but also be ranked in the top 15 in the U.S. boxing rankings. Recognizing the immense opportunity, Lewis shared this information with his boxing coach, and they both believed it was his best chance to make a name for himself. Before the start of the tournament, doubts loomed large, but Lewis surprised everyone by defeating an unbeaten 4-0 boxer named Matt Marks in the first round, before beating a 3-1 fighter named Kelvin Edwards, showcasing his skill and determination. However, in the final match, he faced Theo Jeffers, a fighter with a strong amateur and professional record. Despite James's immense willpower, it was not enough to secure the win. Determined not to let this setback define him, James vowed to not only win the U.S. boxing title, but also overcome the very opponent who had thwarted his chance at supporting his family. After losing his match in the 8-man tournament, Lewis's boxing coach told him to rest up for a couple of weeks. The coach wanted Lewis to take a break from boxing to clear his head, so Lewis spent this time off with his 2 boys and his mother. However, Lewis still felt that something was missing that had cost him his fight with Theo Jeffers. One night, when everyone was asleep, Lewis decided to watch the bout between him and Theo Jeffers, and discovered a few key mistakes that had led to his loss. Determined, Lewis returned to the gym not only to win, but to redefine his fighting style to become a more well-rounded boxer. This decision paid off as his coach organized 3 mid-card U.S. ranked fights for Lewis, all of which he won by knockout. After these victories, Lewis faced Theo Jeffers in a rematch, with the winner breaking into the top 10 U.S. boxing ranking. Thanks to his redefined, well-rounded boxing style, Lewis managed to win by split decision and finally get his revenge on the man who had handed him his first loss. After triumphing over his rival, Lewis James set his sights on claiming the top spot in the U.S. boxing ranks. His coach advised him to defeat one more of the top 10 fighters to earn a title shot. Lewis achieved this by securing a spectacular knockout victory in his last fight, elevating him to 7th place in the U.S. boxing ranking. However, the reigning champion relinquished his belt, prompting the Boxing Association to arrange an 8-man tournament to determine the new U.S. boxing champion. Without hesitation, Lewis signed up for the tournament. Leading up to his first match, Lewis intensified his training to further enhance his aggressive fighting style, which paid off when he secured a 3rd-round knockout against 8th-ranked Eddie Whitaker. In the semifinal, he faced his rival, Theo Jeffers, and emerged victorious in a decisive match by a KO in the 4th round. Then, despite being knocked down in the 2nd round, Lewis rallied to knock out the number 2 ranked fighter, Michael Eastman, in the final, claiming the U.S. title. However, tragedy struck later that night.
If you don't follow boxing but know its champions, you'll want to hear this heartbreaking news. On Friday evening, beloved boxer Lewis James met an untimely death in a tragic car accident in the Bronx. Shortly after his US title win against Michael Eastman, James was driving his green car home from a his match when disaster struck. As he approached an intersection, a speeding vehicle ran a red light and collided with James's car with catastrophic force. Despite the immediate response from first responders and relentless efforts by medical professionals at a nearby hospital, James succumbed to his injuries. The driver responsible for the hit-and-run fled the scene, prompting a police investigation. Authorities are urging anyone with information to come forward to help bring justice for Lewis James and his grieving family. This loss leaves the boxing community and James's family in deep mourning. Lewis James was more than a fighter in the ring. He was a father and a beloved figure whose absence will be profoundly felt.
Corey Brewer is a young man grappling with the recent tragedy of losing his half-brother, Lewis James, who died in a car crash last night. Just a week before Lewis's title fight, Corey learned from his mother, Beatrice, that he had another brother. This revelation came when Beatrice explained that Lewis's father had a one-night stand with her 17 years ago when she was a sex worker in New York. Afterward, Beatrice left New York and moved to Detroit to start anew. There, she met Desmond, a youth worker and boxing trainer, at an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. They married 2 years after Corey was born and eventually relocated to Canada to escape the hardships of city life, settling in the suburbs. With Desmond finding work at a local gym while Beatrice took a job as a cleaner for a nearby church, Corey began boxing at the age of 12, training under his stepfather, Desmond. However, everything changed following Lewis's death. A month later, after their step-grandmother passed away from a stroke brought on by overworking herself, Lewis's 2 sons moved in with Corey and his family. With all these changes, Corey decided to enter the Golden Gloves tournament just a week after his 18th birthday. He hopes to gain recognition for his stepfather's gym and win a cash prize. Corey Brewer's career begins with him competing in the Amateur Golden Gloves tournament in the welterweight class, where he quickly dominated, winning every match by knockout. He eventually faced 2-time champion Jacob Carter, with the winner receiving a cash prize of $10,000 for their respective gym and the Golden Gloves belt. Carter resorted to dirty tactics during their match, headbutting Corey in the first round. However, this did not deter Corey. He ultimately won the fight by knocking Carter out in the 4th and final round, securing both the cash prize and the amateur belt. Corey decided to turn professional the following year after discussing his potential with his trainer, Desmond. Desmond believed that Corey could achieve even greater success with his current abilities. However, the gym where both Desmond and Corey train is losing money and is on the verge of foreclosure, making it difficult for Corey to focus solely on his boxing career. Although he initially wanted to study and follow in his stepfather's footsteps, Corey ultimately pursued his boxing ambitions. He had an impressive run, winning 3 fights before competing against the number 8 ranked national fighter, Luke Lyon. The winner of this match would earn a shot at the Canadian welterweight title. Corey triumphed by knocking out Lyon in the 4th round, securing not only the victory, but also an opportunity to challenge the Canadian champion, Theo Jeffers. We begin this part of Corey's career with him resting in the hospital 1 month after his fight against Theo Jeffers for the Canadian welterweight title. Corey's brother rival, Theo Jeffers, experienced a significant downfall after facing Lewis James in his rival's death, eventually winning the U.S. title a short time later. However, Theo struggled at the world level, suffering 2 losses. Seeking to improve, Theo moved to a new gym in Canada, where he worked his way up to become the Canadian welterweight champion. Unfortunately, despite Corey's best efforts, he lost to Theo by knockout in the 4th round. After this setback, Desmond delivered the news that Theo Jeffers was forced to retire from boxing due to a detached retina sustained in his fight against Corey. As a result, the title was left vacant, prompting the Canadian Boxing Organization to host a 10-man tournament next year, with the winner earning a chance to compete for the Canadian title. This development gives Corey valuable time to train. A couple of weeks after leaving the hospital, Corey changed his fighting style to adopt a jab-heavy approach rather than relying solely on his power as a slugger. This adjustment proved effective, as he won all 4 matches leading up to a showdown with his rival and former amateur champion Jacob Carter on an ESPN undercard. The event was nearly canceled due to a fight almost breaking out between the 2 fighters. But ultimately, the match took place where Carter won via 4-round knockout, winning the Canadian welterweight title. We begin this part of Corey's career 1 year after he won the Canadian welterweight belt. During that time, Corey defended the title 5 times, earning him a rank of 10th in the world and putting him in contention for the North and Central American title. This title would be significant, as it could cover an additional 3 months of rent for his gym. However, something big happened one day after completing some weight training in the gym. Desmond informed Corey that the #1 contender for the world champion had to pull out at the last minute, and the champion had handpicked Corey to fight him. Desmond also mentioned that the cash purse was enough to buy the gym. If Corey could survive the full 12 rounds of the fight, the purse would increase to a sum sufficient to save the gym, win or lose. Given this opportunity, it was a no-brainer for Corey to accept the fight. The current welterweight champion, Cameron Liam Miller, was on a record-breaking streak, boasting 35 wins with no losses, all of which ended by knockout within 5 rounds. Despite this, Corey still chose to take the fight on short notice. The bout itself turned out to be one of Corey's hardest tests. No matter how hard he got hit, he kept fighting. Despite his best efforts, Corey eventually lost, getting knocked out in the 8th round. After the fight, Corey was rushed to the hospital, where he received the devastating news that his boxing career was over due to a broken jaw. However, Desmond had some good news. Despite the loss, a clause stated that if a challenger could survive against the champion beyond the 6th round, they would receive a mandatory $100,000. This amount was enough to save Corey's gym, concluding his boxing career with a record of 14 wins and 2 losses.